Where's my pajamas? I'm wearing my pajamas. All right, panel. All right, I'm going to need the box. Do you feel scared? Yes. Do you? Yeah, exactly. Yes. What's drawn up? Or in? Or out? Okay. So this is talking about teaching awareness through movement for experts. We'll start off with Ruth. Oh yeah. Avoidance behaviour. The spirit of journey. So I'll start off with Ruth. Ruth, would you please describe your ATM classes for us? Who do you work with? What sort of lessons do you teach? Oh. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Keep going.
Okay, so I've got 2 classes and I run them both out of a community centre. And my Monday morning class has been ongoing for, I could nearly say decades, at the same place. And in the morning, it mainly attracts, well, it does. It's become even more so a seniors class where the average age would be 70 plus. Some people have been doing classes for a number of years and they're very well trained, shall we say. And the lessons that I do for them most likely are relatively simple lessons. I don't know if I'm a bit of a nanny with them. I could be at times. And then the evening class I only started this year, and they're my young group. They'd be 50 plus. But there's quite a difference in ability between the 2 groups. And so that's an evening group, and I tend to do a greater variety of lessons in different positions and more challenging lessons with them.
Fran, same question.
Yeah, I don't think this is on, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Oh, it's so strange looking at this thing. Well, I've had quite a few classes in institutions like the Victorian College of the Arts, the John Bolton Theatre School, and Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. Currently, a lot of those students come to my private classes. So I got a lot of experience by teaching very young. By the way, just because they're young doesn't mean they're agile. So sometimes, people who've just come out of high school are not particularly fit. And most of them fall asleep in the middle of the class, if it's a morning class anyway. But I really, how do you say, got my teeth or cut my teeth? Thank you. Yes, I cut my teeth on these classes. And even if you only get $40 an hour for what you're teaching, just go out there and do it is my advice. Don't worry about the money just yet, it'll come. But get as much experience as you can. So that was 30 years ago. And now I'm teaching a Tuesday morning class in a studio in Brunswick. And the parking has become so difficult that my classes are actually getting smaller. So small, in fact, that I had to move back home again. I do have a studio at home, but it only takes 4 people on the floor. But I kind of like those little intimate classes, in fact. And people that, they've been coming for a long time. This is your bread and butter, really. These are the people who will follow you wherever you go, and they have from church hall to karate studio to, all over the place. So those are the people that form my 3 classes. It's interesting that the evening classes, the people are more tired. They come straight from work, and I can't do the same lesson with the evening classes that I do. The morning classes are feistier. They can handle something like the class that you did just now with Susan. And then I've got a class where nobody can lie on their belly. So I haven't taught a prone lesson for 20 years with this group. But we can do things on our side. You know, you can get extension in different positions. And then, of course, I do a lot of postgraduate teaching. So my ATMs change depending on where I am in the world and what subject I'm working with. Is that enough?
Yeah. We'll come back to you, but yes, for now, yes. Thank you. Lisa.
Okay. So I teach 1 class a week. Most of my practice is FI, and so 1 class I can fit in. And it would be a 50+ class, and most of the people in the class have some sort of limitation that I need to work around. We try and sneak in and change it, but you know, I cut my teeth on a very different group. I worked in a pain clinic, and so I was teaching people who I didn't want to activate their system at all, and it was a great training ground for flexibility in teaching ATMs. So I would teach ATMs that could be done in lying on your back, sitting against the wall, sitting on a chair, same lesson. So I got very, I sort of had a collection of ATMs that I knew would be very adaptable. And so now I'm, I think that taught me to be able to do a lot of lessons with a lot of variations to give people options.
Mm.
Oh, and Ruth and I run workshops, so that's a whole different thing. So I guess there's, I've done the pain clinic ATMs, I do my regular ATM classes now. Doing ATM in a workshop setting is different again. And then the other setting I've taught in is for, sort of a one-off for a specific group. So something like a group of physio students who would be the most difficult group I've had to teach. But those sort of, so different groups, different settings, different expectations all need different adjustments. Yeah.
Jenny.
Thank you. Well, I started teaching with a U3A group in the next suburb down the road, University of the Third Age, so seniors group. The nice thing about that is they pay their once-a-year membership to the organisation, and then they can sign up for any classes they want. So I didn't have to find people, I didn't have to take money. They turned up, I turned up, and we each had the expectation that a lesson would have been prepared and would be taught. So that was a great opportunity to get started. Then over time, as I had my own centre, I was teaching up to 5 or 6 classes a week at one stage, and then moved to work in a more fairly large part-time role at the Gawler Foundation, which runs retreats for people with cancer and multiple sclerosis. And so I did some ATM teaching there in that context, where people need to be able to find comfort, particularly in sitting for their meditation practice. And at that time I kind of wound down what I was doing in my own centre and moved my FI practice home. Having escaped from U3A down the road here and thought I was kind of, going into money making, one of my locals closer to home rang up and said, "Oh, we saw your ad in the local paper. Would you be willing to come and teach our U3A class here?" which of course is a voluntary position. So for the past, I don't know, it's got to be at least 10 years, I've maintained that class, and that's, with all the running around and travelling and trainings and things, the only thing that I've really maintained. Though recently I have taught a series of lessons to a group of pregnant women and their partners, which was an interesting experience, coming in with a brand new group again and teaching somebody else's program. So I might say more about that later too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm curious now. We do a lot of ATM in this forum. What are your observations that's different the way we teach ATM here versus the way you would teach a public class? Like, I'm kind of alluding to it a bit as we're going, but what are your observations now, the shift, so that you don't go into a public class and teach them like we teach you? That could happen.
The biggest difference that I notice is the lack of beginnings and endings and of connecting it to external life as a rule.
Yeah. So you're saying that when you teach the public, it's got to be more standalone, more like a very discrete lesson?
You start each day, they're coming in from outside, so you've got to transition from the world to the floor. You've got your scans and maybe some questions about what they noticed since last week or what's happening in their selves and lives. And at the end, you've got the transition of taking them back into the world again, which we don't often do here because we're coming back after the break or tomorrow or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else got any comments about that? Just little traps to be aware of?
The difference between teaching in a training program.
Yeah, and the public. Because, I mean, some of you do ATMs in a community setting, don't you? I mean, so maybe you can answer this question as well. But just so that you don't pick up our teaching style, the way we teach ATMs in here, and just transpose it out there. I mean, some things are the same, some things are different. That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I think I made that mistake myself when I began to teach ATM, because I didn't know how else to do it, actually.
Yeah.
And there was no ATM class to go to in Melbourne in those days, so we was like fresh out of the training program. And all we had was some tapes that we bought, Frank Wildman's tapes and people like that. You soon learn that there are people who can't follow the language that we use. And we have to be so careful with things like, think about taking your right shoulder forwards and backwards. And I'll never forget a terrible, embarrassing moment in one of my first classes in St. Kilda. And a woman sat up and she said, well, do you want us to think about it or should we do it? And I kept using this Feldenkrais training language. So that's one thing that's different here, is that you guys get to know the lingo.
Just on that, so does that mean you have to be more directive?
Yes.
How would you say that?
I would either say, imagine what it would be like to move your right shoulder forwards and backwards. Don't do the movement yet, but just imagine it, which is what think about it means, except we just use this California language. And definitely more directive. There's much more freedom here to sort of get up and wander around or go to the loo or get yourself a cup of tea and so on. So you need to contain the group when you're... and plan, well, I've learned to teach in terms, and I follow the school term. And people pay in advance now. So if you come, there are different price ranges. There's a concession price, a cheaper rate if you come for a series of 10 lessons, or $30 for a casual visit. Because, you've got rent, you've got insurance, you've got guild membership, and you have to cover your costs. And I started having themes because they like themes.
Ah, this is a good point. Yep. Okay.
And people really say, what's the theme for the next term? So they get all excited, and they might bring someone with them because it's a shoulder theme or something like that. So my current theme is Feldenkrais for strength. So these are some of the movements that clearly come from Moshe's judo background, where you have good, strong contact with the ground to strengthen bones and to learn how to use yourself more efficiently. And they love it. So the lessons are quite difficult, some of them, but they're loving the challenge despite the age and whatever's wrong with them. They do love to be challenged with lessons that are tricky, like pretzel legs and so on, which you haven't met yet. I think that's, yeah.
Yep.
On that note of being challenged, you said that there's one group that you haven't taught for 20 years, but here when I'm pressing my
You had to, yeah.
So that's one of the differences. That if there's a whole group of people like me who's don't have to go there.
Well, what do you think, panel?
I didn't quite get the actual question.
So I'll repeat the question. So just so that it gets on the thing, tell me if I'm wrong. So with your class, for example, that doesn't, is it that they don't like prone or that they can't do prone? I think it's actually something that we have to tease out.
Yep.
So Yona was saying that she doesn't like prone, but in here she's had to learn to do it because it's...
Yeah.
Didn't like it because she couldn't do it very well.
No, these are people
painful.
who are injured.
Uh-huh.
They have neck injuries, or there's one woman who feels like she's going to choke if she's lying down. Then there's somebody with vestibular problems where taking the head left and right makes her dizzy. So, I mean, there are only 5 students in this little class. So, hey, we don't have to have prone lessons. We can do it in sitting, and we can do it in side lying.
So there is this sort of element that you balance how much challenge, I think is Yona's question as well. So that you're saying some of your classes, they really like a challenge. Mm-hmm. There's some things that you've made a choice to not challenge them about.
Yes. And I can read the group. If they're looking exhausted, they're like Tuesday night, 7 o'clock. One person's a lawyer, the other person is a journalist. They're all exhausted at the end of the day, but they've been coming for 20 years. So they get something out of the class. But if I see that they're just not able to meet the challenge that I'm giving them, I'll change the lesson.
So
you really have to read the group and just see if they're having a nice time or not.
Yeah.
So for here we have a curriculum and a kind of a lexicon of things that we need to get through over the course of the training. And whilst there is some flexibility and adjustment according to where the group's at and what you need, we're kind of constrained a little bit by making sure you have a certain range of experience. Whereas with your local group, keeping the customer happy and being responsive to their needs is more important.
I'm just on the lying prone thing. I have one person in my class who, Ray knows this. She's had pubic symphysis instability, so lying prone for her is massively challenging and painful. So I just say to her, "Let me know if you're not coming." And then the rest of the group gets a prone lesson. and they all go, "What? Oh, Marion's not here." So they complain about it, but they do it. Would I be right? So, and then, so because I don't want to leave out all of the richness of those lessons, but I always also want them to have to know that it's possible to, do a lesson like that. And then you just build in lots of rest. If you're getting uncomfortable, change your position, how can you do all of that stuff? But you know, for some people, it just is going to be a horrendous lesson that they're not going to get anything out of. So, yeah, well, she's been coming for a long time. But yes, if it's a new person. So, yeah. Sorry.
I love prone lessons. Can I just put in this? But I love prone lessons. If you'd said to me, roll over onto your stomach, I'd go, yes. Just to put it out there for prone lessons.
And I think just on the prone question, I might do like a rolling lesson. So then people come onto their stomach, but just for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then they go into, you know, most of the lesson might be rolling from the back onto the side and then just the end going onto their stomach. So they gradually get used to it. And I think with experience, if my groups might range to about, say, 8 people, if someone's really having difficulty, I'll try and think of similar movements instead of being on their stomach, being inside lying. So, you know, change your orientation, but give them a similar movement. But that came with experience, because initially to run sort of 2 lessons in the one time would have been too complex.
Yep. Okay, Martina, I think you had your hand up.
Will you use only mats, or do you also have the option of a Sunday table?
Mats or table was the question.
For class.
For class, I only do it on the floor or chairs.
Same, ditto.
Okay, when I worked in the pain clinic, I always had a couple of tables there, because getting on and off the floor was often, you could do a beautiful lesson, then the struggle to get up off the floor again was really, would undo anything you managed to do in a lesson. But the logistics of doing that in a room that is not your FI room is, I don't do it.
I've had people a few times over the years who've had surgery or think they have the limitation of not being able to get up and down off the floor, and I've brought in a table which has been used once or twice, but people are so uncomfortable about being different from everybody else that I haven't had anyone who was willing to continue to use the table.
Anchor first and then Joel. Oh, okay, Joel.
But if one of those injured people would put a table in the air, then it's a left use to pop up.
Always put a chair near them. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anchor?
Yeah, encourage them to use that to get up and down.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Anchor?
I was going to ask how you both have introducing people to very principles, like especially if there's new people coming like into your group of established students.
So this question is about introducing the principles for new people.
This is called passing the box.
It is. I'm just going to dive in. So I've got a pretty well-established group, and then I have new people coming in, and I think I keep looking at Ray because he's in my class, and I don't want to say anything. He's going to go, "You do not." That's right. He's asleep anyway. So it is. I really need to know if somebody new's coming in. So I have had people saying, "Can I just drop in and do a class?" And I don't, because I need to teach a lesson that I know is going to be accessible, and I'll also talk much more through, you know, setting it up, and in the breaks talking about how we do a lesson, how it's different from other things they might have done. So there's always a lot more explanation if I've got new people in the group, and I think it doesn't hurt my regulars to hear all that again as well. And yeah, so it's, but it is a very different, you know, because I want them to get something out of the lesson and to understand what we're doing in there, and not just be confused and look at everybody going, "Why are you coming to this thing?" You know, because it's something that you really progress in your understanding of how ATM lessons work. So.
Yes, I think it's very challenging when you've got a regular class who've been coming for a long, long time, say 7 people, and then you get a phone call and somebody says, "Can I just come in and experience the class. It depends, the phone conversation is so important. Is there anything you particularly want to learn, or you find out if they've had an injury or something? If they have, then I need to see them personally first for a private lesson. And then I'll decide whether it's appropriate for them to come to a class. It just depends on the kind of phone call that you have with them. But, as far as group dynamics are concerned, if there's a regular class that's been coming, there's a warmth with everybody, like it's a clan. It's your clan. And 2 people come into the clan, and my guys are really friendly and very welcoming, and so am I. But it's really interesting how few people join my clan when it's been going for a while. It's like, I went to boarding school as a child, and it's like having to go to someone else's family for Christmas. You just don't feel that you're part of that family. So that's something else I wanted to mention. What was the other thing? Anyway, you might have something to say.
In regard to the learning principles of somebody new, I would do similar to Lisa. I would just talk a lot during the breaks about the basics of going slowly, working within your comfort range, etc. Also, sometimes at the beginning of my class, I would get people working with a partner and to do like a reference movement and have a chat, I'd say, well, watch how the person reaches up to the ceiling. And then they will talk to each other. So I think that's quite good for a new person because they start talking to somebody who's been within the group. And if they haven't got a lot of awareness of their body, the person that's watching them can give them some visual feedback. And over the years, my group has changed. I've got regulars, but then new people come. And maybe because of the setting being a community centre, it attracts a similar sort of person. So they tend to be very supportive of each other, but welcoming. And they tend to stay, sometimes not.
We're just interested in the U3A experience where you do get a lot of drop-ins and outs.
Yeah, so particularly at the beginning of the year, there could be quite a number of new people as well as the ones who have been coming forever. So I would normally begin that class with a little bit of explanation about how what we're doing is different from an exercise class, that we do less than what's possible. We go slowly so that there's time to notice what's joining in, what's getting left behind, what effects it's having on your system. But what I often do is ask the people who have been coming for a while, what do we need to tell these people? What do they need to know? And that often works quite well too, that they'll sort of pop up with different things that I've forgotten to prepare. But they'll also talk about their experience too and how beneficial they find it, which is a nice way of getting a bit of advertising. With the group that I did recently for the pregnant lot, as well as doing some of that, what I did do was put them in pairs and have the stack of blue headrests and towels and ask them to help each other experiment with height of the pillow and make it higher and lower and which is more comfortable, which is less comfortable, and find your Goldilocks, just to really give them a somatic experience of the difference in what comfort is, because young fit people will tolerate all kinds of things without even having any idea of what the difference between more and less comfortable is. So that gave me something to sort of refer back to later.
Just one more thing on that point. If I've got my regular group and I've got 1 or 2 new people, I find myself really teaching to those people because the rest of them I know will sort themselves out. But if there's a new person, I'm really watching them, really trying to get, respond to what that person or those people are doing very much. Yeah.
Yep. I-
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, but sometimes moving in close is really useful because then they know you're talking to them and they can think that it's just a general and they're going along their habitual way. So sometimes coming in close, and I certainly do that with my regulars because I know they'll cope. And sometimes I will do it with new people if they're really persisting in doing something that is not going to be good for them. Yeah.
She works the room.
I do. I wake people up too. Sorry.
I think it's good to have lots of props for people who might have pain. You know, for example, making a hoop with your arms and putting the arms on the floor above your head. Not everybody can reach the floor. If you're going to teach that kind of lesson, have rollers there so that people can put a roller under their arms and still get the sense that they can do the lesson. And I think it's good to do that because people can learn that Feldenkrais is all about self-organization, like organize your comfort. Ask for something if you're not comfortable. Most people say, oh, no, I'll be right. And they'll suffer through a lesson with pain, which is, how most people live. So blankets, towels, good headrests, a clean room, a nice atmosphere, somewhere that's well heated in the winter, not too noisy, like paradise. You have noise? Yep. Yeah. You're in a clinic. In the clinic.
We just have an interview.
So, Lisa.
No.
Did you want to say something?
Oh, and Nicole? Oh, sorry. Did you have something, Ruth? No. Nicole? Go.
You're a bit, yeah. Catch.
Thanks. Yeah, so I was debating for a long time which class to do with this new little class that I started up. And I thought, well, what do I like? And I love rolling and stuff. So we embarked on a rolling lesson, but a lot of them were office workers from school. And I got reports back during the week that they were really sore and they got giddy and all of this sort of stuff. It's like, oh no. So, I think I lost a large percentage of what might have been a really big ongoing class. So is it just, yeah, I know. So, but is it just hit and miss? Like if they hadn't been, yeah. Is it hit and miss, I suppose?
So this is about choice of lessons. Yeah.
Who's busting?
How do you choose your lessons?
Did you have your hands?
Okay, so when I started, Edna, our Edna, who was our assistant trainer in our training group, she said, Frayem, teach what you love to do. I had a set of lessons. None of them included kneeling. So really easy lessons. And that's how I started, just with what I knew how to do. I did a public speaking course with the Council of Adult Education, 6 weeks. It was really wonderful to know how to temper your voice, how to project your voice, and how to gain some courage talking in public and giving workshops and so on. It was really a useful thing to do, except they called it, what do they call it?
Is it Toastmasters or something? No, that's debating.
But that's also useful, Toastmasters, yeah. But this was just a course at the CAE.
Uh-huh.
And if I did not do the lesson the day before and tried to teach it out of a book, it was a fiasco. I can do that now. These days I can. But choose what's easy. Choose what you like to do yourself and something that you know about. That's the way to start. Don't get too fancy. I really tried to get so fancy when I went and taught at the VCA, and I got into such a terrible mess. So keep it simple, doable, and then progress as you learn more, get more material, bring those classes in.
Choice of lessons, Ruth?
At the beginning, I go for the keep it simple, because I think that you forget how much you know, and in the training you do learn a lot, but the average person that's come to my class, they really, I guess their body awareness, their ability to monitor themselves, it's pretty minimal in comparison. So I just do a very simple lesson often if I'm starting a class, and I would choose a lesson maybe that starts off to be one-sided, so people then say after they've done one side, I'll get them to stand up, and there's an obvious difference for most people, so they think, oh, there's something about this. But then I wouldn't leave them like that, because I don't want them to go out limping or feeling weird.
Walking around in circles.
Mm-hmm. So then I'd bring them back and, do it either through getting them to imagine most of the second side, or do a bit on the second side to even them up. But I think, and I still do it sometimes, I overestimate people's abilities, and I'll do a lesson that I'll start out on and I'll think, oh, they just can't do it. The movements are too challenging or whatever, and then I guess you've got to adapt to that situation. And I'm thinking, I know once I did a lesson which was sort of, reaching down for people, and I had two younger people from where I worked, a physiotherapist and a naturopath, but they were gym people, so they just overdid it. They could do it, but they just overdid it. And then, they're going, oh, my legs hurt the next day. And so I guess, it was that also, as a teacher, maybe I didn't reinforce enough to do less, or they just couldn't do less. So I think it's a matter of having those experiences and learning from them for the next time.
I would just reiterate, to start with, you want something that you're pretty sure people can sense a difference. So give them, like in the pain clinic, often I did a lesson with sensing feet and connecting through, but so that, stand at the start, feel what you feel, can you feel this toe, like being very specific about what they can sense, and then same thing at the end. I really wanted something that they can notice something different, because it's all very well kind of feeling nice and, we get this lovely, this whole feeling, but often that's taken a little while to develop that sense of a shift in yourself. And some people, thinking if I've done classes for physios, for example, you want them to not just feel a little bit different, but to see that there actually is something that's changed. So, like the opening the arm one is a beautiful one for people like that who want evidence that something's changed. So it's not just, oh, wow, I really can go further, and I haven't stretched, and I haven't, it's sort of like something with a bit of a, something that's surprising for them, but that they can really feel and really kind of see is different. So,
yeah, I would normally start with a lesson that's fairly simple, like a basic flexion extension or side lying differentiating hip and shoulders, which usually gives people an experience that something's different. They can tell they're flatter on the floor, or they feel different on their feet, or one side feels different to the other. But it's also useful to think about what skills do they need to learn in order to be able to do awareness through movement. And that's something that I think we probably could pay more attention to in here, but that's a different soapbox. things like, can you tell the difference between comfortable and more comfortable? And whether that's built into the lesson or whether that's something you do separately first. Can you tell the difference between what it feels like to lift this shoulder or that shoulder? Can you feel the difference between doing what I normally do and doing less? You know, how much do you have to move your finger to tell that it's moving? So some of those things are the sort of the building blocks of being able to do the lessons that we just get down and do. So thinking of ways of building in the skills into the early lessons.
I've got questions being negotiated. Simon's actually next. I have noted the other 3 hands, but this was negotiated. Go, Simon.
A short question or?
It's close. Because you've had like this thing of like having long-term classes, I've got 2 questions about it. I'll ask one. And you're saying, of course, there would be an existing dynamic in the class, and it's a little bit maybe uncomfortable for new people to come into the class, maybe just because of the closeness of the existing people, but also this thing of there are sort of fundamental principles about engaging with an awareness through movement lesson that you don't want to have to take people through, or you don't want the existing peoples have to go through all those things. So is there do you set up like a foundation class as well that can actually run in parallel that you can attract new people to before you translate them into your existing class? Is that a thing? It's probably a yes or no question. And okay, so my second question is, I've forgotten it.
More than yes or no?
Yeah.
I've got a comment about the principles. It doesn't hurt people to hear them again, because we have to tell you guys again and again and again. Go slower.
And people,
go slower.
people just revert to habit. When it's once a week, it's very different from being immersed in it. So, I still in my class I can say, even if you're thinking you're doing this small, do it less. And actually, very recently, a very long-term member of my class said, I didn't do the whole lesson. I stopped when I started getting a bit uncomfortable, and I still feel like something's changed. And it was like, yes! Now, I would have said specifically to her many, many times, just this might be a good place to stop here. Just have a rest, even if you can see that other people are still going. It's taken her years. It was a huge revelation for her. But that wasn't what I was going to say. What was it about?
Sammy's question was about beginner's classes, like repeating.
Oh, no, repeating. No, but there was something else. Foundation classes. So that's actually, I was thinking that's kind of a little bit why Ruth and I are running workshops, is to try. Now, we tend to often get people who are already going to classes, but we're really trying to get new people in so they have that experience of the workshop where we are doing lots of explaining and getting a few lessons, not just one, and trying to bring them into our classes a little bit, or hoping that's one of the ideas.
At one point, I had 11 classes a week, and I was scattering myself all over Melbourne, trying to make a living and trying to get started. And at one point, it's funny how you attract a certain kind of person into your classes. And because I was fragile in the middle of a divorce, everyone who came to me was fragile, and there was a lot of weeping going on in my classes. It's pretty powerful. I mean, you don't mean to project your shit onto the others, but it just does happen energetically on some level. But then I've had a lot of people with fibromyalgia and chronic pain. And I thought, I'm going to split this class up into an easier beginner's class. And that was fantastic to do. It's a good idea if you've got the space, and even if it's only 3 people at a time, they'll feel more comfortable if it's a small group anyway. But it's a good idea, Simon. Yeah.
Carol, I think, was next.
Carol, do you want the thing?
Just on what you just said, I've been going to workshops and I've really loved them, the way they start with discussion, maybe visuals, maybe skeleton, a little bit like a mini. And then the ATMs, if there's 4 of them, they'll go from so the instructor will know what they want to achieve at the end, and they've programmed the ATMs so that the average person will change throughout those 3 ATMs to actually, end up with the final solution, if we could say that. In that's not a very good word to use. Sorry. That they will get that 4th ATM done well. But my question was, do you ever touch or demonstrate on a person? Because I know we don't do that in class here.
Maybe we just haven't touched you, Carol. Yeah. I touch with my eyes.
Yes.
Yes.
We do. Sometimes a bit of touch just to help somebody clarify a direction. Most often I will intervene if it's about getting into the starting position. If people are having trouble kind of getting organised to do the next bit, the next bit isn't going to make any sense. They're not going to get anything out of it if they can't get into a position. So that's more when I would either say, stop, look, this is what I mean, your hands this way. If my language skills are inadequate to communicate to them what they need to get started, then that
help them to find comfort.
Occasionally, yeah.
You can't make anybody comfortable.
But, I have classes that, certainly at the beginning of term can be 25 people, and I don't carry enough towels and pads for everybody. I try to persuade people to bring things and discover the difference, but doesn't always work.
Touch and demo.
Touch and demo. Thank you. So what I will often do is, if there's something that I'm looking around the class and it seems unclear, and I'll actually say, would anyone like me to come around and help with that, hands on? Or, can you sense blah, blah, blah? If not, just wave at me. And I have got a few people who just will always ask for clarification, and sometimes I just go and help them so the rest of the class can get on with it, and sometimes I'll get them to just sit with it and stay with that uncertainty because it's such good learning. If somebody's doing something that looks dangerous or that they're going to hurt themselves, then often I'll just say, do you mind if I help you a little bit with this? Because I don't, you've got this one session, then there's a week before the next one. So if they do anything, if they're just constantly doing the same thing and can't seem to understand there's another, even I try words first, and if it's just not going, I'll say, can I give you a hand with this? Yeah.
Yeah, I would do the same. My words would be, would you like some feedback on this move? Which implies, is it okay if I touch you? That lesson that you did at the beginning of the segment, taking the shoulder forwards and backwards, and some people were going up and down, thinking it was forwards and backwards. Is that kind of thing where I would say, can I just put my hands on you? Or give them the idea of taking the elbow forwards and backwards, and they get a different sense of the intended direction. Otherwise, the whole lesson's going to be about shoulder going in the wrong way for that particular lesson. But with, I mean, most people really like some clarification when it's needed. They feel that they're being taken care of really well. For example, side lying lesson where you'd have, you know, lifting the head and feeling the ribs bending or not. And so I'll get people to work in pairs and I'll just say, just put your hand, it's a butterfly touch, just put your hands on this person's ribs while they lift their head. And it increases the movement, improves the movement immediately. So there are times when it's really useful. That was your question, wasn't it? Yeah. No, I'll just keep saying it. And if they don't get it,
Depends how well you know the person.
yes, yeah.
And what's a strategy? If someone is that you, without singling out an individual, how could you explore a range of
Well, then I'll
speeds?
get everyone to go faster
Yes.
and then try it a bit slower.
And you can
Because
say, you
sometimes-
know, if you're going fast, go slow. If you're going slow, go
Yeah.
fast. And the person who's going fast might not know they're going fast, so they might go faster.
Exactly right.
And then you really know that they're screwed.
That's right.
You know, and that you might, you know, but you try other things first. I get my point about this is you always go for self-discovery first.
Yes,
'Cause-
exactly.
And intervening, touching and so on at the individual level is kind of your last resort, because it means that you've given up that opportunity for self-discovery. And sometimes you have to, for all the reasons that the panel has said. You have to work with yourself about making those decisions. If you're a nanny person, hold yourself back. If you are lacking in responsibility, maybe be a little bit more helpful. You know, like that's where you have to know where you are on that spectrum of helping. You have to have the awareness of your own tendency and work with yourself first about that. Because sometimes people can project their own desire for help and their own lack of comfort with confusion.
Yeah.
And you could miss an opportunity. Conversely, you could lose half your class
Yeah.
by giving them that opportunity and them not feeling supported.
And I think it's important not to rescue people also.
Not too soon. No, that's right.
If someone is having a bit of a cry, which often happens, I mean, the reason why people can... What? What? No. We're all a lot stronger now. But if somebody is having an emotional response, I think it's a big mistake to go up and get the tissues and offer them a glass of water and would you like to sit up and talk about it, or put your hand on their shoulder. It's like they feel safe enough for this to happen in your class. So leave them alone. Let them be with their emotions. So there's part of us that would like to put your hand on them and soothe their brow and give them a brandy or whatever. But then that person will start to expect that from you all the time. That's a codependent personality. It is.
Barbara had a question. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm hogging.
Yeah.
Just one other thing about touching somebody who's... I did that once in a workshop, and luckily I knew this person very well, because she said to me afterwards, oh, now I'm just scared I'm going to do everything wrong. So what she got from my touch, was that I was correcting her, and that therefore she had been doing it wrongly. And I've done a lot of FI with this person, but she hasn't come to ATM classes because she doesn't really like the group thing. And I absolutely confirmed that this was, it was not good. And luckily we had a good conversation around it, and it was fine. But that's the risk you run as well. You can go the next. Barbara.
Barbara? You've forgotten what your question is? Okay, yeah. Oh, no, it's coming. Too late.
Okay, so this is a very practical question. As brand new Feldenkrais practitioners, when you were planning your classes, did you write up your own transcripts? Did you go to, a resource book that had themes laid out? How did you start? Where did you start? How much time did it take when you were beginning to be a teacher? Big question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Who would like this one first?
So a question around preparing.
Well, it's changed over the years, but when I started, I basically I think there were some tapes, as Fran was alluding to. There were Frank Wildman tapes, there were other tapes from the training, and I would ad nauseum write things out. So if I was listening to a tape and didn't know the steps, I'd, nearly go verbatim, and then I'd work out the steps, then I'd do the lesson. But over time, that became a lot easier. And I'd also refer to a manual, but I'd always, and still do, I always try to do the lesson so I can feel it within my body before I do a class.
And part of my public speaking course at the CAE was to learn how to make little cards, those cards, cardboard cards, and pardon me? Index cards, yeah. You can get them at op shops and things. People don't use them anymore. And you have to really get a good system. Like number 1, number 2 is the next card, not over the other side of number 1, which is how I started off. So you don't want to, and you've got to keep them, discreetly. So, because there are frozen moments when you teach your first classes. It's like, oh my God, I can't remember what is it that comes next, and what shall I do? And everybody's resting, and then they start to lift their head up to see if they've done anything wrong. So I think writing them out is really useful. Now the card thing didn't last very long, but it was helpful. So, and then you get a kind of shorthand for yourself, like backwards is BW, forwards is FW, movement is M/M. What else? Right is R with the big circle around it. L is left is L with a big circle around it. Yeah, you make a shorthand, make up your own shorthand. Did you want to say something about that?
But not if you've got them numbered, right? Yeah.
So I used to think that it was an absolute failure if you had to look at notes. Like I had to know the lesson and remember it, and if I had to look at notes, I'd think, oh, everybody will know I don't know it. So I was lucky that when I was teaching in the pain clinic, there were a lot of lessons that I taught many times. I just got really very, very familiar with them. And I still go through a process when I'm teaching a new lesson, and I try to teach new lessons because it's so good for me. But I'm not worried now about taking notes in. I just say, look, I've got these here in case, and they're not detailed, but I figure there's such a lot of preparation for a class in terms of sensing it yourself and writing, choosing a lesson is, a big process in itself, and how that's going to connect to what they've already done or not, and all of that stuff. So it's a big time commitment running an ongoing ATM class where you're always offering variety. So now I'm not at all. I've just set up the expectation that I will, will have some bits of paper, and if I shuffle through them, hopefully it's, okay. Yeah.
I'm not really sure where this myth came from, that you're supposed to be able to remember a lesson and do it verbatim. So yeah, I mean,
Not from me, that's for sure.
No, I mean, certainly we don't often see teachers in the room wandering around with a book in their hand, but the notes are on the table or the computer's there. I almost always teach from notes because I don't want to have my brain filled up with what was the next step, what was that really important point I wanted to make about this thing. So they're there as a resource when I need it.
An aide de memoire.
Exactly. In terms of finding lessons, you know, the Melbourne 1 training had a very limited library of resources. By Melbourne 2, when Lisa and I came through, there was a little more stuff available. Now there is a huge wealth of resources available. You've got 550 Alexander Yanai lessons, and I can tell you that soon the remaining missing lessons will be discovered and translated and brought to the world.
Wow. Wow.
I just had a chat.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, they exist in Hebrew, but it's impossible at the moment to say which ones we haven't got. So that's the first step, and then they need to be translated. But
Yeah.
the missing AY lessons and lectures will be discovered. But that's neither here nor there. There's 550 to go on with. There's the lessons that you've been taught here, some of which are nice standalone lessons that you've got on the recordings in the knowledge base that you can listen to and take notes from. There's heaps of stuff available in books, on CDs, on people's websites. Varies in quality, but there's lots of stuff. And also, we're giving you activities of starting to think through what lessons you would teach for different groups. And so you'll hear from each other ideas that you can make a little note and catch up with that person and say, where did you find that one? That sounds great, or that's one I want to teach.
The problem I have with the training here, sometimes people talk about a specific lesson and we're never given the name of the lesson. So, oh, do you remember that lesson where we did this and this? And it's like, yeah, I'd love to teach that, but what was it and how do I find out what that was?
Every lesson that's taught here, as well as being recorded and put up in the library, is noted in the synopsis, which is a document that sets out. Yeah, well, there's also a written document called Segment 5 Synopsis, which lists out each day what lessons were taught, what activities we did, and the lessons have their source and their name.
Just to be aware that the names change a lot.
Yeah.
Because often lessons are a hybrid, so sometimes there's a,
Yeah.
you'll see in our notes that, you know, the one that Fran taught, part of it was from Alexander Yanai and some of it Fran's adapted herself.
Sure, but
So,
we'll note that.
Yeah.
And if you really want that one, then you have to
Yeah.
either go back to the recording and transcribe it, or see if Fran's got notes and is willing to share them, or whatever. Yeah.
And just to know that names change, that one of the biggest problems with ATMs is the way they are named. There's so many different ways of naming them, and it's confusing even to us. You know, it's just, there's not a good system for naming. So it's a problem that we have all inherited. Some people have tried to fix it, and it's still not fixed yet. And I don't think it ever will be. It's a bit like naming, I don't know, can't think of it. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's a inherited problem that we all struggle with. Okay.
Are you curious? You fix
Yeah.
Um,
Now we're going to restrict it. Anyone who's asked a question doesn't get to ask one. We're only going to people who haven't asked a question. So have you asked, Glenn, have you asked a question, Glenn?
Yep.
No? Or yes?
Yep.
No. Okay, off you go. I'm being mean now because we've only got 2 minutes to
picking
go.
on me.
Yeah, no, I'm just telling the group the rules are from now on only people who haven't asked a question. Oh.
Do you, because there's a lot of talk about, like your new lessons and all that, like your series, but how often would you reteach a lesson? Like, the reason I ask is I had a little class I was doing for a while, but I was also doing some stuff with some other people that these people also came to. And I ended up teaching a couple of them the same lesson a couple of times, and one individual, she ended up doing the pelvic clock like 3 times, but I did it differently each time, like but within like say 3 weeks, and both of them, she is. I think I broke a hip, but what was interesting for me was that both the people who'd done the lesson at least twice were really happy about it. They go, oh, now I understand what's going on. Oh, now I can go back home and remember what we did, so I can do this at home now. And the woman who did the 3 times, she was just stoked. No, seriously, she's going, oh, now I get it. Like there's that clock thing happening, and oh, it was really my whole back.
So the question is, do you repeat
how often
lessons?
do you do it?
That's all right. And I'm being Jenny Brocky. I'm channeling her. She's much tougher than I am.
It's useful to write down every single class that you teach. So I keep a book where I write down the lesson. Alexandria and I 543, for example, talk about the theme in the lesson. How did people like the lesson? I use my own language, that it was like great success. But Lisa had trouble with the something, because I keep track of people who have certain problems with certain lessons. I've got years and years of a journal of every lesson I've ever taught with comments about each lesson. And when I'm sort of frazzled and I just can't think of what to teach, I'll go back a couple of years, enough time for them to have forgotten the pelvic clock, and then I'll bring it back and I'll say, do you remember doing this? And they'll say no. So keep track, like it's up to you how you do that. But I've been teaching, like the favorite lessons, I'll do them once a year as a treat.
Danielle?
When people hurt themselves, if they come back the next week, when people have hurt themselves or they've felt some pain and they come back the next week, do you have things to help them with that? Do you dwell on that? I mean, it's fine to say, oh, just do less, do more slowly. Do you think there are actually things that you can give people from that?
Strategies for when they help them, when they may have helped them. It never happens.
Yes, it's all the stuff we do. I don't have anything very clever, but except to ask them what they think was going on, see what their interpretation is, and I guess it happened to me actually very recently. I had a new person in the class, and she said, no problems, I'm fit and healthy and da-da-da. So I said, okay, well, you can join in with this series that we're already doing, which was about lifting the head on the back. And she afterwards felt sick, dizzy, and she'd spent the whole lesson just doing that instead of the whole flexion thing. So That was, you know, a beautiful moment. And so I rang her during the week to see how she was, and she was very grateful for that because I actually was quite worried about her. And she told me after the lesson, oh yeah, my neck is really bad. She hadn't told me before. So so then the next lesson I did, I chose a lesson which was about moving the head from other parts, but in side lying, and very specifically really trying to teach that lesson, that it's a very small movement of the head, that you want to include a whole lot more of you, and this is how you get to do it comfortably. And that was a really useful learning for her. Yeah. And the next couple of lessons as well.
I think you've said it all.
Okay, all right.
Dan?
Oh, no, what?
I actually ask people about the type of pain, because there's pain you get from having hurt yourself by doing too much or doing a movement beyond your capacity or flaring up an injury. And there's the kind of achiness you have after having had a busy day in the garden. And so to help people understand that sometimes you can feel a bit achy when the muscle has let go after it's spent a lifetime of working. And that's a different sort of pain than having done too much. And so if they can differentiate, well, yeah, it was just a dull ache and it went after a couple of days, but the movement is now freer, that's good pain. But if they'd perhaps done a bit much or moved without awareness, then that can be a learning for this week.
Pat?
You're the one with crying people.
No, they don't cry anymore. Got a new husband.
There's your solution, Pat, a new husband.
How do I deal with people with emotional pain?
You know, like when people first come to your sessions and you're adding paper,
Yeah.
and you will say to them, how can I help you? You've got pain in your hip or something like that, and they say, no, I've got emotion.
And they're ringing up about a class or about a private session?
No, about a class, maybe someone's died, or how can it help them? How would you
Yeah. Pardon? Depression. It's very rare for people to tell me that on the telephone. And I mean, I think ATM is fantastic for depression. It really helps to lift people into another space completely. I've got psychiatrists who send people to me who've got severe depression.
How would you let them know that, this
can be helpful?
Yeah, that's exactly what you'd say. You might find that the class could be very helpful in this situation. Come and try it, and we can talk about it afterwards if you like. Yeah.
I was just thinking what Susan was talking about the last few days with you, with muscle tone and emotional tone, and how you could talk about how we embody our emotions, and that by doing the classes that they will affect how you move. It might be affecting your muscle tone, which in turn will affect how you feel. Or around that.
Yeah, my simple comment is that every emotion has a posture that's associated with it. And as we get more choice around the ways we can move and hold ourselves, we get more choice around how we can experience emotional states as well.
Yep. I think Dan had his hand up. We'll take maybe 2 more questions. Jenny Brocky says 2 more.
So if you have like a theme, like a series in a term, and going back to our exercise this week in creating our own lesson, and in particular the reference point, the reference movement and the scan, would you relate the creation of those 2 things to the general theme, or would it always be specific after doing that lesson? Oh, then I'll do this kind of movement and that particular scan, or sometimes will you just have a lesson and you go, oh, I forgot about a scan, and you'll just put together a template like your normal scan or something like that.
Well, I do the reference movement and the scan related to the lesson.
Well, I know that you're thinking of walking as the theme for the series that you're planning for your study group. So, of course, you get people to stand and walk and give them some cues about, do you stand more heavily on one leg than the other, all the obvious kind of reference movements. And the thing that I often forget is to come back to the reference movement at the end of the lesson. But somehow the students walk away and some of them just say, well, I feel completely different, without me having to say,
I think if you can do both, it's lovely. So you relate it directly to the lesson, and then if you have an overall theme, that you can sort of keep coming back to that as well. I remember asking Marg Mayo whether she has themes for her classes, and she goes, oh no, just do whatever you feel like. And that was quite liberating for me, because I'm thinking, oh, how does this connect to this and this one? How will they know that there's, and actually, I can have a beautiful theme running through and nobody will know what it is, even if I tell them, so I go, now, have you noticed that this is, and they go, yeah, I don't care. They just want a nice lesson, I think. Would that be true?
People forget what you did last week and whether it connects together. I've sometimes had themes that we've kind of revisited and often don't, because many people are coming because they just like to come. They come for their weekly session that helps them cope better with the next week, and so they're not that fussed as a rule. And yes, I've got to the end of the lesson and thought, oh God, we didn't do a reference movement to be able to tell the difference. But sometimes some of the basic things of standing up and noticing how your feet are on the floor, whether you feel taller or something. But one thing I will often do, because people get different things out of a lesson, is before we get up, ask them to think about something that they might be doing in their life in the next few days, and imagine from this state how it would be to be doing that thing now. What would be different? What would you notice, to make a link to something that's relevant to them, and then get them up to start to sense themselves in vertical and movement. Yes, absolutely. That if the brain has linked this state to that context, there's a better chance that you'll get the change manifesting there.
I've got them all scared. Final point, would you like to share, some point that you felt really good about your teaching and something where you did a blooper? You can do the blooper first, or, huh? So, sorry? What? Did I say that? Oh.
Have to wait for that to re-emerge.
She said you were highly evolved.
Maybe I need a mission statement if you're highly.
We'll think about that. Yeah. So, one of your points where you made a blooper and was something where you felt that this is something I really want to take forward. A little bit like we've asked people to do for their ATM teaching next week.
Okay.
Something that you learnt
the hard way.
Yeah. Your biggest blooper.
A bit of a boo-boo was that I approached I was living in Kew at the time, and they had a Kew Seniors Centre or Senior Citizen Centre, and I said to the guy, would you like me to offer a class about the Feldenkrais method. Then I had to explain what that was, and he sounded very interested. So he said, oh, yes, we'll put it in the newspaper and advertise it, see how we go. He got 6 responses, and so I had my plan, my lesson plan, which was the dead bird done on the floor. So I get there nice and early with my 6 mats all prepared, and 15 people turn up. They didn't think about registering. So some of them came in a wheelchair, some of them came in with crutches. There was, and I'm sure that happens in the pain center too, like there was such a mixture of, let's say, abilities. And I asked everyone to get on the floor, ready for the lesson, and they're all staring. And some were completely deaf, so they were, I had to keep repeating the lesson for them, because I'm in a similar situation myself now, so I understand. And one of them got on the floor and couldn't get up again, so we had to get someone to pick her up. And it was just like, oh, I've never sweated so much in my life. And was there any feet? So I had to get them up into chairs. So there weren't enough chairs. So then we had to search the whole premises for chairs so that everybody could sit. And one person had sciatic pain. She couldn't sit, so could she stand? And on it went. So be prepared. Be prepared. With several lessons, just in case the one. And it was the only lesson I knew how to teach without looking at notes. So we did it in sitting. And even though I said, look to the right and take your head to the left, they were all looking at me, just staring, staring, waiting for it. So they like this and this. I'm saying, take your head to the right. Staring at me. Anyway, so I don't want to make a theatrical thing about it, but and then of course then you say, so how does it feel? Nada, nothing. It's like, and then there was another class planned for the following week. So 2 people came out of it. And so I was quite pleased, really, that and then there was a woman, she came up, she said, you've got no idea how wonderful that lesson was. I'm not constipated anymore. So you never know what the outcome's going to be.
I can't beat that, Fran. No, I think my most repetitive blooper is doing something, as I said before, that people aren't up for, and then thinking, you know, how can I make this lesson easier? Or if it's really chosen the wrong lesson, how can I subtly change the whole lesson without people knowing? And it'll work, because it'll be surprising. People, you know, they're not that aware. And I guess on a positive note, I was once doing a workshop teaching people how to fall, which was a series of lessons, you know, falling, starting from very basic, falling from sideline to falling from standing. And that was really nice, seeing how that progressed over the 3 days, and how at the end people could just fall on the floor without hurting themselves.
I can think of so many things that have gone wrong. Where do you start? But yeah, I think more things went wrong early on, surprise. And often it was filling in. I'd had a few people and I filled in for their classes before I had a class running, which is great practice, because then you don't have to get your class together and all of that. But often I didn't know who was in my class and whether there were issues. And I remember doing a baby Sphinx lesson, which is lying prone, resting on your elbows and forearms in this nice beautiful extension, you do all this lovely. And there were 2 people in the class with whose main thing was shoulder pain. And so they, you know, and I was saying rest and do all of this, and they were, you know, not bad at looking after themselves, but both of them were really, really sore afterwards, and I had to do a lot of nice stuff after that for them to sort of trust me again, I think. So when there's something about when you don't know the people in your class and you haven't had a chance to figure them out, you know, go for fairly safe things that can't do too much damage. That's, yeah. Mm.
I think my most recent sort of learning challenge was in teaching this pregnancy series, that because it was a program that someone else had developed and I had agreed to teach as was written, I didn't think through my own intention clearly enough of how did I want to take their expectations from an exercise class to an awareness through movement class. And so that was kind of a thread that I felt that I had to kind of struggle with through the series of trying to teach them awareness through movement without having really set that up as what we were doing in the beginning, with my own expectations and my own language around the learning strategies of the Feldenkrais approach, the learning principles involved, and the way in which I wanted them to be able to experience the content and to translate that not only just into going home this week, but for down the track and the rest of the challenges that they'll face.
Right. Okay. I think I found that really, really interesting panel. Thank you very much. Thank you. I, of course, love channeling Jenny Brocky and being tough with everybody, and that's good. And your questions were great, so I was tough with you about your questions, but that's fine because that's my job. Marvellous. Have a lovely lunch. You've got a lot to think about. And I know your questions are bubbling up all the time, you know, in the breaks, and that's great. And ask yourselves these questions as well. So, you know, you've got a lot of experience coming out of your work on the floor, so you can chat with each other in the breaks as well about your questions. Lunch is 10 to 1, so let's come back at 10 to 2. Is someone having a lesson?
No.
All right, so we'll come back at 2. Does that give you time?
Yeah.
Oh, well, and when we come back from lunch, it'll be Jenny. So have your practice development homework hot to trot.
Absolutely.
So what did we decide? 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. See ya.
See ya. I didn't.